And kind of what brought you here to the workshop today?
You can go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Hello. I guess I can start. My name is James. I currently am making a career change into education. And so my current resume for the career I'm going into would essentially have no experience. So I figured this is a good way to get some information on how to make I have one. I have a cover letter, and I made one that has like all the stuff I've done, like the classes and everything like that, just kind of like apply for stuff. So, but to just kind of like finely tune it and get pointers on that. That's what we're gonna do.
I love that. I love that, James, and congratulations on making a career switch. That's a really exciting move.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Ernest, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what brought you here today?
Well, yes, I'm here because I am taking an internship. And this was a required course. I could always use help with my resume. So that's why I'm here today.
Awesome. Well, I am glad that you have showed up today. And even though this may be required, I think you're absolutely right in that there's always new tips and tricks out there when it comes to creating and crafting your resume. So thank you for joining us, Ernest. You can go ahead and go back on mute, and we'll go ahead and talk to Joanna if you're available. Can you say a little words about what brought you here today? I may not be able to go off mute. So if there's somebody else who'd like to introduce themselves, I'd really appreciate it. Just so again, I can get a feel for who's in the audience, and I can make sure that I really touch on some of the points that you specifically are interested in learning.
Hello.
Oh, there we go. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm just like finding ways to like make my resume better and like to become better. Like make it better too.
Perfect.
And I'm a hospitality right now hospitality student, and I kind of wanted to also do a minor, but I don't know how that works yet. But yeah, I'm how you call finding out things.
Oh, that's awesome, Joanna. And congratulations on being a hospitality student. We've had quite a few hospitality students come through TRIO SSS and transfer on to Cal Poly, which has an amazing hospitality program within itself. So if you are ever interested in transferring and furthering that, please let us know, because we can definitely help you in that process. Okay, someone else like to jump in? Say hello. Caesar, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cesar Romero. I'm the new office assistant at TRIO SSS, and I'm here to learn more about the process of giving this presentation, and also, to learn a few things about resume building as well that I can, touch on, or I can improve upon. And nice to meet everyone.
Thank you, Caesar. And we also have Danielle on here, who I'd love for her to jump on and just say a few words, because she's an amazing, amazing director right now at the Career Center at WLAC. And I would love for you guys to kind of just to get to hear her voice and to know just how much of an expert she is in this realm as well. So you always have her as another partner in your resume and career development.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Hi, Shannon. So good to see you. And nice to meet you, Caesar. We're so glad you're all here today, and we hope that you'll come back next week for the professional development workshop on cover letters as well. And yeah, we are just here to provide you guys all the best information that we can as you're exploring your careers in whatever stage you're in, whether it's a new career, a career transition, whether you're just beginning here at West or you're wrapping up a degree, whether you're seeking your first or second job, or you've had many jobs before. There's always more to learn when it comes to resumes. And so Shannon and Trio and myself and our team here at the Career Center, we're always keeping up on all the best tricks and tips when it comes to resumes. So don't ever be shy to reach out to any of us. We're always here to help.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Riley, would you like to say a few words and just introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Carla. I actually started as a student worker here at West LA, graduated with a business administration degree, and I'm now transferred to CSUN. And I gotta say, it was hard leaving West LA. I did not want to leave the nest.
Yay!
So yeah,
Congratulations,
guys,
Carla.
take advantage of everything that the college offers, because I'm telling you, the kind of support that you receive here will not even be like close to what you get at what you get at your university. Transfer universities will not be anything like what you get here. Like, we are, like, I want to say, like, we're holding your hand. We're like making sure you succeed. So please take advantage, because your world will change if you leave this college.
So true. So true. So true. Thank you. All right. Well, we'll go ahead then and we'll just kind of jump into it. So again, my name is Shannon Kobus. I am the TRIO SSS Director in TRIO Student Support Services. And we got a couple more people jumping in here. This is going to go by a little bit quick, and I want you to know that you can stop and ask questions along the way, but we'll also have room for questions at the very end. And so very first thing I want to kind of pose to you guys, do you know how long, on average, someone in HR looks at your resume? Just throwing it out there, just a question for you guys. If you were to give me a guess.
1 minute.
Oh, you're very close, James. You're very close. It's about 3 minutes on average. It's about 3 minutes on average. And so keeping that in mind, what we want to do is make sure that we're creating a resume that not only is information packed and really shows the best side of us, but is also really visually appealing and kind of gets the point across without overwhelming the person who's looking at it. And so just to give you a little background on me, besides hiring and going through this process myself as a director and somebody who's worked as a consultant for the YMCA and United Way, I also have a master's degree in cognitive science, as well as a master's degree in social science and social psychology. And I am going to be putting a little spin on everything that we talk about today to kind of get you some tips and tricks that you may not hear in other resume workshops. So just keep that in mind, okay? So the very first thing we want to do when we are creating our resume is I want you to do your homework. So make sure you are looking at a position that suits you or is one that you like to try your hand at. And then you're going to be tailoring your resume to that position. So even if you're not in the job field right now, you should be looking at Indeed, Glassdoor, and a couple other resume places out there that are job places that they're putting their job descriptions up, printing out those job descriptions and looking at what are they looking for right now? What kind of skills are they looking for? What are the desired qualifications? What is the required education of these different positions that I may be interested in applying to? So even though you're not ready to create your resume, even though you're not ready to apply for the job yet, about 6 months before you're even able to step into that job market, we want you to be doing homework as to what employers are looking for. And then that way you have some padding time to actually start to fill in some of those gaps to put on your resume when it does come time to apply. When I'm looking at your resume, I want you to know I'm going to be making judgments about you. If your resume is neat, well organized, and very professional looking, I'm automatically going to assume that you too are neat, well organized, and professional. I will tell you right now, I look to see if the periods are there. I look to see if the commas are there. I look to see if the spacing is correct, because all of that tells me how much you can pay attention to detail. Now, here's another question, and the research is a little bit split on this, but how long should your resume be?
1 page.
Okay, we have 1 page.
Three pages?
3 pages? Okay, awesome. So this is really going to depend upon, one, where you're entering in at the job market. So if you're brand new to the job market, a 1-page resume is absolutely fine. But what they've actually found is the research shows that if you have a 2-page resume, the HR specialist actually spends longer time looking at your resume than if it was just a 1-page resume. So I don't want you to ever feel pressured to fit everything on 1 page, because again, the research shows that HR is actually going to spend more time looking at your resume and being more specific at the details they're pulling out of your resume when you have a longer resume. So I just want to put that out there for some of you who may be transitioning into another career and you have a larger resume or you have a larger CV. You don't have to feel like you have to cut out all that stuff in order to make it 1 page. Does that make sense? James, you raised your hand. What would you like to?
Yeah, so, but if you are doing more than 1 page, should it actually be 2 pages or should it be front and back?
We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into formatting. That's a great question. Remind me to circle back to that. Okay. The way we're going to move forward in this workshop is we're going to start at what would be like the very top of the resume, and then we're going to work our way down. So when we're talking about the top, sort of the header, you can kind of see a little example of this right here. What do we want it to be? We want it to be clear, concise, contact information. Now, looking at this example right here, what am I missing? We want our name, we want our phone number, we want an email. What am I not putting on there?
Oh, I don't see anything.
If we use this as our example right here, Joe JobScan, Seattle, Washington. We're not putting our exact address on there. One of the reasons why we're not putting our exact address on there, especially here in, say, at Los Angeles, is because I know that if I'm working at Culver City, if the job is at Culver City and I see that you are located out in Palmdale, I know what that commute's going to be like. I know what that's going to look like for you. By putting your exact address on there, you're also giving me more demographic information about you than we need to know. So you can just put something general, such as Los Angeles, California, if you like. You can put Los Angeles, California, and remote work, if you're used to doing remote work as well. There's ways that we're putting information out there that we're actually signaling to the person who's looking at our resume who we are and like what our ability to show up for work every morning would be. Does that make sense? The other thing you see on here is I have an email address and I have a phone number, but I'm not putting the word phone and I'm not putting the word email. I know what a phone number looks like. I know what an email address looks like. Do not cloud up your resume with useless information like such as email, phone. Go ahead and make it very clear and concise and make sure that that email address itself is one that's very professional. We don't need to have, prettygirl123@gmail.com as your email address. Email addresses are free, and I highly suggest that you create an email address that allows you to have your first and your last name within the address itself. The more times that hiring manager sees your name, what it does to us subconsciously is cues us to remember that name. On average, we need to see something 5 to 7 times just to have a memory of it. So the more times that we can actually weave our name into the resume process itself and the way it is visually presented, the more times we're subconsciously going to plant that information into the person who's looking at it. So if we have our name at the very top, we have our name within the email, and we'll also show we'll be putting our name in the footer. That's going to be 3 additional times that that person is going to be coming across your name. Does that make sense? Any questions about that very top area? Okay, moving on. So a lot of times what you're going to see, especially if you Google resume, is you're going to see an objective. Right underneath we put our name, objective. To use my amazing customer service skills to advance the company's client satisfaction. You know, 10 to 1, this objective is going to be extremely generic. It's going to be something that everybody else in the field says, and it's not going to set you apart. It's not a good use of space. It's not a good use to really highlight how you're such a great fit for that position. So instead of having an objective, you know, if we kind of go back to our first thing, summary of skills, we're going to put a summary of skills. We're going to put a summary of things that absolutely fit what that job is looking for. So for example, I know this is really small print here, but you'll see it says highlights. If I'm looking for a job that wants 5 years of customer service experience, I'm going to put my little bullet point. I'm going to put 10 years of customer service experience. If one of those desired qualifications on there is being bilingual, boom. My next bullet point is going to be being bilingual. I'm going to put word for word as much as we can, matching up to those objectives, the way that I clearly am the perfect fit for this position. It's a quick way to get the person's attention. It's a quick way to show them that you're paying attention to what the job description is looking for. And it's a quick way to show them that you are the perfect candidate for that position. Do you see how using a highlight and really highlighting those skills at the very top, at the very top 1/3 of that page is going to be a better use of space than using a summary or objective that's going to sound just like everybody else? Make sense? All right, we're going to move on now to like the middle part, the very meaty part of a resume, where we talk sort of about education and experience. Now, when I go to apply for a place, remember the very first step is going to be research. On top of knowing what is being looked for in the job field itself, because I've done my research about 6 months ahead of time, I looked at all the different job descriptions, I see what the different companies are looking for. I'm actually going to stalk that company that I'm applying to. I'm going to look at the page that has not only their mission, their history, but also their staff profiles. And when I'm looking at the staff profiles of this company, I'm going to get a better feel for who they are hiring, who's been in the position before me, who's in similar positions. When you read the bios of these staff profiles, are they highlighting their education? Or are they highlighting their previous work experience first? So if you're looking at a company that is really big on what kind of letters somebody has after their name, what sort of degrees, you're going to want to put your education first. If you're looking at a company that really highlights professional experience in years in the field, you're going to want to put your professional experience first. So it really just depends. This is why we're tailoring every single resume to every opportunity that we have. We'll talk a little bit more about what we put in each education and each experience. But do you see how, again, we're making it very easy for the other person on the other side to look at this resume and say like, ah, they get us. They naturally fit with what we are looking for. We'll talk first about education. We're going to want the name of the institution, the name of your degree, and your graduation date or expected graduation date. You'll want to put your degrees or certificates in chronological order, meaning the most recent first. Now, if you happen to have awards and honors and you're recently out of school, as in the last 2 years out, go ahead and put that information in there as well. Especially if you don't have a lot of experience yet, it's a great way for them to see kind of where you're falling on the spectrum. Make sure you give them a good idea, if you're including your GPA, of what that GPA is out of. Not all schools run on a 4.0 system. So if you are going to include GPA, I would say include it if it's a 3.5 or above, and make sure you let them know what the scale is. If it's a 4.0, 4.2, again, it can vary for school. If you happen to have professional development or education certificates that help with this, this is where we'd list them too. I'm going to show you examples of all this in a minute. Another reason why you also want to do your research when you're applying to a company. Unfortunately, sometimes things are very political. And so if you say are applying to an extremely conservative company, you may want to be mindful if you have a lot of, we'll just say, experience doing things that are not in their realm. They're going to be looking to make sure that, again, you're a good fit for their company culture. And so if you are participating in organizations that may be counter to their company culture, that may be a red flag to them. Does that make sense when I say this? Okay, let's look at some examples of this. These are not perfect examples by any means, but there are great examples for kind of how you can do it a couple different ways. So, looking at this top left-hand corner, the person puts what school they're in, the address, expected graduation date, and they listed their major. And underneath their major, which I really, really love, is that they're telling us what their thesis was in and some of the classes that they took. One of the reasons why this can be so helpful, besides the fact that it gives somebody who's kind of fresh in the field an oomph to their resume, gives it a little bit more weight, is because if I'm looking at a job description, and this job description says that they want somebody who has experience in tax law, they want somebody who has experience with advanced accounting. I may not have very many years in the field doing those things, but I can highlight that I've taken those classes and that I have a very strong GPA. So again, I'm putting it right up front how I'm such a great fit for what is in that job description. I've done my homework. I'm paying close attention to the keywords that they're using in that job description, and I'm going to be weaving it throughout my entire resume, not just when I get to previous experience, but also when I'm talking about my education and certificate. Moving over to the one that's on the right-hand side. Here it says Dean's List all semesters. I personally would have liked to see a little bit more information about what that means. What is the Dean's List? Is the Dean's List, 3.0 above? Is a Dean's List 3.5 out of a 4-point scale? What does that mean? In all semesters, I also don't understand what all semesters mean. How long has this person been in school? Have they been in school for a decade and they've been on all semesters? I don't know. But you can see what they're trying to get at here. Here they also talk about their achievements, the awards they've received, and this also gives me a good idea of how they're participating in their school. This very bottom one, on the bottom left-hand side, we again have the school that they're prestigious in university. That's so funny. I've looked at this so many times. I never noticed this at prestigious university. We have the school that they're in right there. Again, they're highlighting the courses that are most relevant to that job description that they're applying for. Graduated with first class honors. That's great information to have. I personally would like to know how many people are in that class. We'll talk a little bit more about this principle in a minute. But first class of honors, if there's only 4 people in your class, maybe not so exciting. If there's 250 people in your class, all right, now I get a better idea of what you're competing against and just how good you are. Received 2 competitive scholarships and awards. This is where they really highlight. I love this. 10 awards for every 1,000 students, 5 scholarships for every 120 applicants. Now, those are some really sexy numbers. That gives me a great idea of who these students are and who they're competing against. That tells me how special they are in the field. And then they included their dissertation. Again, this could be a dissertation. This could be an independent study. This could be something that they're highlighting that they've worked on that, again, directly relates to that job description that they're applying to. Does that make sense? Awesome. We'll go ahead and move down to talking about the experience that we put onto a resume. Now, this is where I want you to spend some time brainstorming before you even start to develop your resume, or before you even take a second look at the resume that you've already created. What is experience? Experience is not only the full-time and part-time jobs that we've held, but it's also the volunteer work that we've done. It's also the times that we've worked in a practicum or got field experience or did internships. These are also great examples of experience that sometimes we overlook. For example, I had a student who, she was a parent at a school and was extremely involved in the PTA. And she was a full-time mother and she was transitioning back into the workforce. And she's like, well, I have no experience. I haven't been in the workforce for so long. And I was like, well, tell me what you've been doing in this in-between time for you. And she talked about how involved she was with her children and how involved she was with the PTA and how she was doing all these fundraisers for school and how she was able to organize and raise over $20,000 for the school. Hello, that is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. And that's an example of volunteer work that you've learned skills from that you can actually highlight and move into the resume itself. So don't just think that because you haven't had experience in a field before, just because you have been out of a field for some time, that you haven't been building skills that's actually going to help set you up for success when you transition into that next position. So really spend some time thinking about what you've done, some of those transferable skills that could be used in any setting and not just the one that you're applying to. How we're going to talk about the previous jobs that we have had or the previous experience that we've had, job title, dates of employment, company name, city and state. If this was volunteer work, you can put the place that you volunteered, comma, instead of being a job title, it would be volunteer, or it would be field experience. I would probably say like 100+ hours of field experience. Again, the more detail that you give me, the more specific you are, the way that you quantify this information gives me a better sense of your actual experience and your ability to hold that amount of hours. Now, this is just an example. We'll talk about things I like about this and things that I don't like about this. When we're just looking at this right here, right in front of us, if this was on a resume, what jumps out at us? What information really jumps out? Well, hopefully when you're looking at this paragraph, the information that they managed a caseload of 450 students jumps out. That number 450 should be jumping out of that paragraph. Why? Because anybody who has an analytical background or tends to be more analytical is going to be noticing numbers first and foremost, and they're going to be noticing the analytics or the data that you're presenting in your resume. Most people who are in HR tend to be very analytical. So again, anytime that you can quantify information, we want to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about this principle a little bit later on. You can also see down here that they're highlighting 10 years experience with these specific software programs. And we love that because it's, again, giving us quantifiable information, 10 years experience, and then they're pulling out very specific software's programs, which 10 to 1 were also listed on the job description. What I don't like about this example is that it's in paragraph form. When something is in paragraph form, it takes us longer to read it. And again, if we're spending just a minute or two looking at a resume to determine whether or not they're going to be a great fit for our company, we want to use as much time as possible to make it easy for them to digest the information we're presenting them. So when we put it into a paragraph like this, it's actually harder for the reader. It's harder for HR to pull out that information to show that you're such a great fit for that company. So again, this is an example of where I would love the same information, but we want it to be more in bullet point format. So the question then becomes, what do we write under each of our previous experiences? First and foremost, do not write any fluff. Don't write fluff. Do not be fluffy. Do not be fluffy. I've seen in the chat, it says job title is foremost. Sometimes job title is foremost, but there's going to be times in which employers are more. If you say, for example, work for United Way, if you work for a big company that has a lot of brand, we'll call it brand impact, you're going to want the company first and then your job title, because that company is going to have more pull to the eye than your previous job title. So talking about what do we write? First and foremost, do not fluff up your resume. If I'm in HR and I go to call for your references and I ask what you've done in your previous roles, they're going to be very specific with me. And the last thing you want to do is be caught in a lie. We should be starting each line with an action verb that is present tense. So if you're currently in the position, if you're currently doing that duty, we're going to be using a present tense word. Anything from the past that we are no longer doing is going to be in past tense. This is another attention to detail that when I'm looking at resumes to hire an individual, if they screw this up, I know that they're not paying attention to what they're applying to. And it kind of, again, it tells me where their focus is. When we're looking at what skills we want to put first in our bullet points underneath their previous job, let's look again at that job description and see what are they looking for. If the number one thing in that job description that they're looking for has to do around customer service and soft skills, you want to go through and highlight your customer service and soft skills as one of your first or second bullet points underneath all the positions that you've done before. I also want you to think about the words that you're using. So for example, responsible for. An important part of your resume is describing your job duties. Job seekers who try to boost their image by telling employers what projects they've led or helped or should be more forthcoming. So when you use the words responsible for, 10 to 1 is going to be an overused phrase, and it's not going to tell me exactly what you were doing. Responsible for case management. Responsible for working the telephone. Responsible for money management. What does that mean? Case management of who? How big was your case? Money management, what was the budget you were working on? What were the exact things? How were you managing that budget? Manning the phones. How many clients were you talking to in a day? So again, we want to be more specific and more thoughtful with the information that we're presenting. Some other words that tend to be overused that we should look at removing from our resume, words like outstanding, exceptional, excellent, organized, good communicator. These are fluffy words. These also are fluffy words. How many of us know somebody who says, I'm a great communicator, And you look at them and you're like, really? Or they think they're really, really organized. And you look at them and you're like, really? What is organized to me may be completely different than what's organized to somebody else. What is outstanding to me is completely different to what is outstanding to somebody else. We'll talk a little bit more in the next slide about how we're going to handle that. But I want you to go through and do an audit of the resume that you've already created, or the way that you were thinking about creating your resume. Do you have skills in there that have been fluffed up? Do you have words in there that are fluffed up? Really challenge yourself to think more specifically about what skills and duties you've developed and how you can talk about them in a way that really gives a clear image to the person reading it, exactly what you've done. The last thing I want to talk in here is show a balance in skill set. For example, individuals who are in the technology field, they may be very, very heavy in certificates and talking about different softwares that they have experience running. When I'm looking at from an HR perspective, that's awesome, that's great. I want to see all that information, but don't forget to tell me about your soft skills. Don't forget to tell me about your interaction with customers, or the time that you won, most valuable employee. I want to see that you can also communicate with others and what aspects of your job you've been doing that actually relies on more interactive team messaging. So give me hard skills and give me soft skills when we're looking at a resume. Going back to about how we look for data in our resumes, how we get more specific in our resumes. We talked about this previously, not only when we were talking about our education aspect, but also when we're talking about the experience. So for example, managed a budget to plan a large-scale event for students. It seems like a reasonable little bullet item that you could have underneath a previous job responsibility. But how much more impactful is it if we say we managed a $12,000 budget to plan a large-scale event for 2,500 students? That tells me so much more about your ability to handle money, your ability to handle stress, your ability to handle a size of students. This tells me more about your skill set and your level of responsibility than the very first one of managing a budget for a large-scale event. Does this make sense when I talk about quantifying your impact? Awesome. Okay, we're going to talk just a little bit more about this. Again, these tend to be a little bit of fluffy words. We taught this, and this. We managed conflict. We set team goals. We oversaw projects. Listens intently. Writes clearly. Do you see how when I'm looking at this, these could all mean different things to whoever's looking at it. This is when you really want to give me a feel for exactly what you were doing and how you were doing it. We can also elaborate on some of these things in the cover letter, which we can talk about next week. Again, I just want to give you a different set of eyes to look at the resume and how you can actually start to present the information and skills that you've already done in a way that gets your best foot forward. Another way to get that best foot forward is to showcase your wow. So I want you to think about every single position that you've ever been in before and think about, what was it that I did really special there? What did I achieve that nobody else did? What was most impressive about my time? Was I recognized for anything during my tenure? Talk about the big wow. If you increase web traffic by 350% and doubled ad revenue over a prior year, that's a wow. If you received honors or awards, that's a wow. Feel free to talk about the competition. We talked a little about this when we talked about education, right? How many students were eligible for that scholarship? There's a really big difference when you talk about, I was accepted into Applebee's nationwide management program. And you actually give me the acceptance rate. Only 9% of people are admitted into that nationwide management program. Only 50 managers nationwide are selected. That's a wow. That's impressive. A lot of people are afraid to talk about the competition, but do not be. You have the skill set, you have the ability to shine. Show it off. Another way that we wow is associating ourselves with big brands. When we talk about principles of influence, authority, this previous one right here, talking about competition, this falls under social proof. It's one of the most powerful principles of influence. We're showing, by showing our competition, we're emphasizing how much better our accomplishments are. When we're showing ourselves associated with big brands, this is considered authority. We have more authority because we're associated with big brands. This kind of goes back when we were talking about, do we put, our job title first? Do we put like the company that we worked for first? What does that look like when we're developing like our list of previous experiences? So for example, I was a consultant for Hollywood Health and Society. And my specific role was that I worked with Disney's pro-social behavioral team to do an analysis of all of their networks and to look for certain pro-social themes throughout them. So I not only have Hollywood Health and Society on my resume, my actual client was Disney. Health, Hollywood, and Society is actually a subset of the USC Norman Lear Foundation. So I have Norman Lear Foundation, I have Hollywood Health and Society, and I have Disney, because they were all contracted through me to do the work. Excuse me, I was contracted through all of them to do the work. So this is a way on my resume, you'll see that I associate myself with big brands, because somebody may be looking at that and be like, I know somebody who works at the USC Norman Lear Foundation. I have a connection to Disney. And it's a way that starts putting in there that I am of a quality worker because I've worked with these companies before. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions on this meaty middle part where we're talking about the education and previous job experience? You see how with education, we can really actually highlight a lot more than just the school we went to. You see with the previous job experience, we can actually show them who we are and what we can bring to the table when we get out some of those fluffy words and some of those fluffy experiences and really quantify and highlight our wow. All right. Well, then we're going to move down to the very end of the resume itself. And we're going to talk a little bit more about formatting and a footer. This is really, really fun. So remember how I said, the more that somebody sees our name, the more likely they are to remember us. So what we want to do at the very end of our resume is actually provide a footer for them. It has our name and our email address and page 1 of page 2 if we do have a 2-page resume. Why? Because if we're submitting a 2-page resume and the second page somehow gets lost, they'll never know that it's a 2-page resume if we just have 1 page submitted to them. So it's nice for us to actually give them the heads up that we're submitting a 2-page, 1 of 2 pages. It's great when we put our email back down there because again, our email is going to be associated with our name. A lot of times on a resume, and again, this is a very old school way of looking at resumes, people put their references or they use the statement references upon request. Well, we know references are upon request. We know that, just like we know what an email looks like, just like we know what a phone number looks like. So we don't have to include those words in there anymore. It's taking a very valuable white space and it's cluttering up the resume that we're submitting to them. Talking about formatting now. We want to make sure that our resume is clear and concise and easily readable. Remember, if they're only going to be looking at this for a minute, we want as much information to be transmuted during that time. And so one of the things we're going to actually look at is what font we are using. So when we're looking at different types of font, there's something called a serif font and a sans serif font. So anytime that you're doing a presentation, anytime that you're presenting information that's going to be short and easily digestible, you're going to want to choose a sans serif font. A sans serif font like Arial really helps the person to see the information clearer and it helps them remember it more easily. If you have to write a research paper and you're going to be using very big paragraphs to like transmit information, you're going to use a serif, like a Times New Roman. But again, if we have short bursts of information that has to be quickly communicated, so say a social media post, say a newsletter, say a presentation, a resume, a sans serif font is going to help the person who's on the other end receive that information and process it quicker. Size-wise, a 10.5 font is best for readability. So when we're talking about our previous experience and we have those little bullet points going through, it's nice to have that in a 10.5 because it's going to be really easy for the person to read. When we talk about the word experience, previous experience, you can make that like a 12, about 2 sizes up, because again, it draws their eye. But for readability, when we have a large section of information we want them to read quickly, 10.5 font is going to be the easiest. Watch the length of the sentences. We shouldn't have more than 7 words because then it gets really wordy. We should have about 3 to 4 points underneath each job responsibility, each task that we've done. So if we were a case manager at Trio SSS, the first point we would talk about is the one that I'm most looking for in our case managers. It has to be student interaction, student engagement. Describe that to me in 7 words or less, showing me how you've connected with that population and how your experience can be quantified in that. Now, here's a big trick. This is super tricky. If you look at this entire presentation, the points right here, did I use bullets? Could you still understand what I was saying without the use of bullets? You absolutely could. What happens when we use a bullet is that it actually trains our brain like a stop sign. Cognitively, what happens when we see a bullet is we kind of stop paying attention to everything that's after that bullet. Instead, what you'd like to see on your resume is instead of these little round bullets here, you're going to want to put a dash. Now this is an arrow, but you'd like to have a dash because what ends up happening when we use a dash in our presentations, when we use a dash on our resume, is it trains the eye to start at one end and move all the way through the line. It helps the reader digest the information more. It helps the reader understand the information. This is a little cognitive trick. I spoke earlier about using white space. Basically, that just means be mindful of cluttering up your resume with information that you really don't need to provide them, such as the words phone number, email address, references upon request. Half of the time we spend looking at this resume should really go to determining whether or not you are a good fit for our company versus trying to find the information in there. And when you put too much on there, it's hard for us to pull it out. No template. Now this is going to be really hard because I know you're really, really going to want to do a template. And I'll talk in a minute about why we don't want to do templates. But do not use a template. Work with a professional in developing a resume that is based on Word that you can then turn into a PDF if you need to. The Career Center is an amazing, amazing reference for you and have amazing professionals there to help you build this resume. Again, Trio SSS, we can also support you in doing this, but do not use a template. And we'll talk a little bit more about that why in about a slide or two. Now, here's another little trick. Whenever we are creating information to be shared with other people, which that's what a resume is, it's information about us that we're sharing with somebody in HR. There are two pieces, two really golden spots on that document. Two golden spots on that document that our name should be on, or the most important information should be. Do you know where that would be? It's going to be right here in your top left-hand corner and in your bottom right-hand corner. The reason why is because ever since kindergarten, we have all been trained to start at the top left and read across and end in the bottom right. This is a cognitive bias that we have as individuals of how when we look at a piece of paper, we are automatically drawn the top left and we automatically stop at the bottom right. So again, for ease, to make it more memorable, we're going to want to put our name in the top left-hand corner. And then we're going to put our email address or any of that important information down here that of course hopefully has our name in this bottom right. This is another trick to make sure that we're imprinting our name in that most important information in these two very valuable spots. If you're creating, say, a flyer for somebody, if you're creating a presentation for a class, this is why when we do PowerPoints, a lot of presentations have that beginning of the subject line at that very top left hand. A flyer most likely is going to have a logo. If they're using cognitive principles, they're going to have a logo in that top left hand and the contact information on the bottom right. Because it's an easy way our brains automatically trick ourselves into remembering it. Pretty cool, huh? I'm going to flip through this really quick and I'm going to talk why we're not going to use templates. So 90% of employers nowadays use a software. It's called ATS, Applicant Tracking System, a software to scan your resume. And what ends up happening is when they scan your resume, it's going to pull out those keywords that best fit the job that they're looking for. And again, I have no doubt that you have those keywords in your resume because you've done your homework, you've done your research. You've looked at exactly what that employer is looking at and you're highlighting and customizing your resume to fit what they're looking for. But if you end up using a template, sometimes these templates are not easily read by this ATS system. So they end up becoming rejected just because of the formatting. Some of these templates also have borders around them or little graphic elements. And trust me, they're really pretty. Like, I really think they're pretty. Shannon thinks they're very, very pretty. But unless you know that a real person is going to be getting that resume first and foremost, I would always, always choose the side of error on the side of caution and create a Word document that has your resume on it that can then also be turned into a PDF and submit that. A lot of times when you're applying to a position, they'll say upload your resume. Again, you can upload it into a Word document or a PDF. I would prefer a PDF, but read the directions from that employer, because sometimes employers have specific ways they want you to label that resume and name that resume when you're uploading it, and specific saving directions. Does that make sense why we're not using templates? Also, when we use a template, we cannot customize it. Like we found, like again, that top left hand, using our name in that top left hand, creating a footer that has page 1 of 2 if we're having a 2-page resume, having our email address in there at the bottom. Templates would not allow us to customize. Templates also tend to use bullet points, and as we already talked about, bullet points are these little stop signs in our brain. And so creating a little dash, templates don't allow us to do that. So just for the sake of making sure that you could pass an ATS system, try to first develop your resume on a Word document, and then you can change it if you need to at a later date. Does that make sense? All right. So before we jump into some examples here, I'm talking a little bit more about resumes. I again wanted to highlight Danielle and her team, which are absolutely amazing, and also show you that there is a website, www.collegecentral.com, that you can find on the Career Center, and that will actually help link you to more resources for your creation of your resume. Again, I think it's in the chat. We are having a cover letter workshop next week as well. And we'll dive a little bit more into how we can craft a cover letter to really support the information that you've presented in your resume. So please feel free to screenshot this information here. And again, you are always welcome to reach out to Trio SSS if you need any support as well. And we gladly accept you into our program and help you move forward. So there's a couple different types of resumes, believe it or not. There's a resume that's called a functional resume, and there's a resume that's called a chronological resume. We'll talk about the chronological resume first, just because this is the one that you're probably most familiar with. So chronological resume is really great if you've had a lot of consistency in your job, and it allows you to really highlight that consistent work record. Now, it can be a little bit more difficult to have a chronological resume if you have a lot of gaps in your job, or you tend to be a job hopper and you can see like you're moving jobs every year or so. A chronological, and again, the details on this are not what's important. It's more of like looking again, zooming out, looking at the information that it is. We already talked about why this is not a very good choice of information right here. You'd want to put your summary of skills directly relate to the position that you're working on right here. But you can see how this is a chronological resume because we do have from September 2010 to present. We worked at Best Buy, February 2008 to September 2010. We are at Barnes and Nobles, and so on. We're going with our very most recent job experience, and then working backwards. We tend to spend about, depending on your work experience and what we're filling out, we can actually go to about 10 years previous, moving about 10 years back. Anything past 10 years tends to be a little bit more outdated. The functional resume is one where we're highlighting more specific strengths and transferable skills. And this is really good for people who are moving into new positions or new fields. The disadvantage, again, is that some employers are not comfortable or more familiar with this one, so it may take them a little bit longer looking at it. And again, when we're talking about making sure that the information is easily readable, available for them, it's easy to read, we want to try to shorten that amount of processing time, that amount of thinking about your resume as much as possible. So a functional resume would look a little bit more like this. This would be the person's name, of course, their summary, which is great for any resume that you're creating. And then the skills they're pulling out. If that job description wants salesmanship as a very, very top skill, that's the thing that you see them asking for over and over and over again in their job description. We put salesmanship, and then we talk about the different aspects of our previous experience in which we had salesmanship. Technical, pulling out different aspects of our previous experience over the years and highlighting it here. And then the work history gets to be sort of more of a blimp, just like the education would be, where we're just saying we worked at Big Red Lobster, we worked at Joe's Barbecue. So again, it's a great resume. It's just a different style. If you have questions on whether a functional resume or a chronological resume would be best for you, I would again suggest you contacting one of us to help you through that process. You can also see that there's now combinations of resumes, which we have sort of our professional qualifications. Again, I really love this on any top of a resume because it's pulling out exactly what that employer is looking for and highlighting it first and foremost, and then going into a more detailed work history. This right here tends to kind of, for lack of better terms, like this right here is probably the easiest for employers to see how you fit up and compare to what they're looking for. So any questions at all over what we've covered? Any questions? Okay, I know we spent a lot of amazing time talking about resumes. Thank you guys so much for hanging in there with us. Again, the link to the cover letter workshop is, there we go. Can you guys see me now? Hi.
Yes, we can see you.
Hello, hi everyone. Yay. Again, the link for the cover workshop is coming up. Please, if you do have questions, let us know. We are more than excited to work with you on developing a resume. I know we put a lot of information into this workshop today. A lot of it's probably new information for you. I don't want you to be overwhelmed at all. That's why we are here to support you. Please let us know if you have any questions. Did anybody learn something new? Was this fun?
I did.
Yay! Bye, Danielle. Yay! Thank you, Caesar. Thank you, Ernest. Yay! Thank you, Danielle. Yay! Thank you, Riley. Thank you guys so much. I'm so proud to be here and be a service for you. So have a great afternoon, and hopefully I'll see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. I just
Thank
want to let you
you.
know that I will be emailing the links, the recorded video to everyone that registered tomorrow afternoon. So if you missed anything, I know there was someone who was having technical difficulties and they missed some of the presentation. So I think that's going to be helpful.
Yeah, and please let me, I want to talk to you about that too, okay, hon?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.
Ernest, did you have questions?